Welcome back to another episode. Today we have on the podcast Clay Gaspar, who was recently appointed as Executive Vice President and COO of Devon in January 2021, following Devon's merger with WPX Energy. So a little bit about Clay. He actually joined WPX in 2014 before the merger, and he was president and COO and on the board of directors of WPX Energy. Before that, he worked for Newfield Exploration, Anadarko Petroleum, and Mewbourne Oil, serving in a number of technical and leadership roles. And of course, he's a petroleum engineer from Texas A&M, and he's had an amazing 26 plus year career in the oil and gas industry. He has a wealth of knowledge, and we're so excited to be sharing his story with you. Thank you, Clay, for coming on today.
Hey, it's great to be here, and thank you guys for doing this. I really appreciate the what you guys contribute to the industry and the perspective that you had. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Clay. Well, let's give the listeners what they want to hear. They want to get to know you. A lot of the reasons we do this podcast is because we have all these big names like yourself and these big titles, and we know absolutely nothing about these people. We just see a picture on the news. And so let's just get to, at the end of the day, we're all human. So let's get into your story and who you are, where are you from? Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, early on, I said all my extended family is South Louisiana. Both my parents grew up there. And so actually Morgan City, Louisiana, which is every small town has a festival, right? And so the festival for Morgan City is the Shrimp and Petroleum Festival. So my dad was not a shrimper. We were in the petroleum business from an early age. And so I kind of had exposure to it, but really didn't know much about it as a kid. When we were, when I was 10 years old, we moved to Houston. It was the early 80s. Houston was booming. Everything was great, plenty of jobs. And then the mid 80s happened and everything kind of fell apart in Houston. And so I had probably my external learning about the petroleum industry through some of the cycles. And, as a young kid, I really didn't know what that meant and how that may play into my own career going forward. I graduated from high school in Humble, went to school at A&M. Later got a master's degree from University of Texas, and started the career that you guys were introing on. Moved through a few different companies, and had the pleasure of seeing an independent, privately owned organization all the way through Anadarko, and certainly Devon now is a large major independent. So I've kind of seen a few different roles, worked offshore and onshore, and various roles along the way. So I've really benefited from a lot of diversity in my years, and look forward to sharing whatever you'd like to talk about in those times.
Awesome. So growing up, there was no ties to oil and gas from your parents or family members other than just the state that you were in and the fact that there was oil and gas that you would hear about?
I would say less directly. My dad was a commercial diver, which is a very hands-on, very tough business. He was in the Army, then started diving, and ultimately owned a business. That business didn't do very well. We moved to Houston. He kind of did a restart. And as I said, he was externally into the oil and gas business, more about Gulf of Mexico shipping. A lot of times that was oil field equipment. So I would say kind of on the outside looking in, but no real ties to A&M, no engineers in the family. So I was kind of breaking some new ground and just trying to figure out what this was all about.
So I'd say when you were applying to university and you had to, write down what major you wanted, what made you say, I'm going to be a petroleum engineer?
Yeah, I actually said I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. And I just thought, okay, engineer, everybody keeps telling me, man, you should think about engineering. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And, okay, I'll give engineering a try. Then I had to figure out, okay, what discipline inside of engineering. And mechanical seemed to me like, if I don't know, I want to leave as many doors open as I can. That seems very broad. Well, the petroleum department in 1994, and this is kind of an interesting little trivia bit. If you look at the number of graduates of petroleum engineering, like for the last several decades, there's a bump in 1994, okay? Because in 1990, Texas A&M went out and did this massive recruiting campaign. And so they hired a recruiter, and the first thing he did is he went to all the other majors and started grabbing people to recruit into petroleum with scholarship money. Well, I was a broke college kid. I mean, like broke. And so any dollar is a good dollar. And his pitch was, you can come over to petroleum, you can take a few classes, you can learn about it. And worst case, if you want to switch back to mechanical, we'll give you a few $1,000s and go on about your business. It's like, okay, that's a, free option I'm going to take. And what happened was two things. Number one, they recruited some amazing people in the business, and some of my best friends today are part of that graduating class. But the second thing is they were able to hook a lot of people because they also sought out job opportunities for the summer. I desperately needed some supplemental income. So when they said, hey, anybody interested in a summer job, two reasons. One, I understand what this business is all about. But two, I desperately need some cash. It worked out great. And that's what really hooked me was getting some time in the field, working for Mewburn. That summer was in Woodward, Oklahoma. And it was fantastic. I mean, I really kind of got to put the pieces together so much better than sitting in a classroom trying to figure out what do we really do in this world.
So I have to ask, since you're from Louisiana, why not LSU?
Well, I graduated from high school in Houston, and
Okay.
I would say LSU was on the list, but I didn't have a lot of college affiliation. My dad didn't go to college. My mom went to University of Southwestern Louisiana, it's University of Louisiana now. I don't know, that was real high on my wish list. I applied to Rice, UT, and to A&M. I didn't get into Rice, sorry. But got into A&M and UT, and it was kind of a flip of the coin. I mean, it just, it wasn't like one of those, multi-generational Aggie families, or UT for that matter. But I had some friends going that way. We visited campus, and it just seemed like a great place to go to college. And I know everyone says this, but yes, I loved the college I went to, and it was an amazing place to go to school.
Well, I'm pretty sure everybody would agree with you when it comes to A&M. So there's probably not much fight there when you're saying that kind of comment. So when we talked last, you mentioned a lot about your mentors and how they helped you throughout your career and helped guide you to where you are today, including the internship, which you kind of spoke about, that really changed your focus. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think about the journey that we all take in life, and those college years, kind of from when you graduate high school to maybe a year or two after you graduate college, that maybe 5 or 6 pivotal years. And many people are finding spouses, finding careers, deciding on majors, deciding on a path and a course for life that at the time are just another decision. In reality, this sets the trajectory for the rest of their life. And so, it's just amazing to me to think about those decisions that we put on 20 somethings. Say, okay, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? For me, I was incredibly lucky to intersect with some amazing people, some of which are still some of my best friends today. That first summer, Woodward, Oklahoma, I was working, the engineer I was assigned to was Eric Hoover, and another A&M guy. He called me up and he said, hey, are you going to be here this summer? I had never been to Oklahoma. I had no idea where I was going to live. I had no idea I was going to pay for it. None of those things. I just said, you want a job? I said, yes. And we'll figure the rest of it later. So thankfully, he reached out to me, said, hey, I've got an extra room. If you want to live with me, we can, I'll show you around, all that. It was an awesome summer. I mean, and I saw through Eric's eyes what, a couple of years out of school looked like. And, he just dedicated so much time to teaching me all summer, and, inside the office and outside of the office. And like I said, we ended up in each other's weddings and still really, really super close friends today. So that was a huge impact on me. And I think about that today, how I can help people that are in similar situations, just kind of give them a little bit of some perspective to help them make some incredibly important decisions.
What do you think he told you that kind of rings or stays clear to you the most today? Like what advice would you give, or what do you think is the top sort of things that he might maybe guided you, that if you're speaking with somebody from the younger generation, you would pass that on to them?
Yeah, I think it was less about the words or the topics. I mean, he's just a really cool guy. I mean, he's just such a great human being that I have to admit, if he was probably a mechanical engineer or a chemical engineer in a different industry, I would have been like, I want to be like that guy when I grow up. And so there was a little bit of just kind of coincidence. I met the right mentor. But what I saw through Eric's eyes was the relationship with real engineering problem solving, but in a very practical sense of in the field, working with people. You got an idea, we're going to get it done today. We're going to try it out and we're going to see results. Like that instantaneous gratification of fixing things real time, real problem solving, not writing a report to be sent off to headquarters that someone may or may not read, or maybe someone may or may not act on. This was a real problem solving, real time, and that just resonated with me in a big way. And I got to interface with some amazing people, field guys, other leadership in this office, and I just kind of like the way it's set up. That family kind of feel to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like there's always either a person or a book or a movie or just something that kind of changes your life, that just impacts you in a way that it just changes your route of your life and you just would never expect it. And you could be that person
Sure.
for someone else. This podcast could be that, thing for someone else, which is crazy. So I like what you're saying. It's just always looking for ways to maybe see how you could be that person for somebody else that you never know. So I know in 1996 is when you started working for Anadarko. Can you talk a little bit about the transition from being in the field and kind of having that field knowledge and then going to the office? And then also later on, what made you decide to go get a master's degree?
Yeah, so it was an interesting time. Again, I'm still in those early windows, first few years of kind of deciding where I want to go in life. And not just important career decisions, but spousal decisions and where do I want to go. Mm-hmm. So I proposed to my now wife. We were engaged, and she said, absolutely want to marry you, but when you get back to civilization. And one of the challenges with working in the field is it was very remote locations. She was an accounting major and worked for a big, I think they were big five at the time, big four now, Ernst & Young, and doing very well. And she had her own career aspirations. And so trying to balance that while I was kind of semi-mobile in my career, we had to just put our marriage on hold until we got to the same city, a city that could accommodate both of our career paths. And one of the big draws to Anadarko, well, there were two huge draws. One was it was a path back to civilization, I would say, via Houston. The second was I had quite a few friends. I mentioned that graduating class, 1994, Texas A&M. I think there was like 6 people of that class that had gone to Anadarko. And so it was very much a known. I had really great insight into the culture of the organization and kind of what was going on there. And by the way, Anadarko was hiring some of the best of that class. And so I was flattered to be to be considered for a role there. So that move, although I felt like, I had done so much with Mewburn, I so appreciated that field time. For the next step in my career, I felt like I needed to take that kind of step. And 16 years later, it worked out really, really well.
So what was your first role within Anadarko, and how did your success then succeed after that? Because I do remember you recalling that you had some basically key people within Anadarko that really, talked about you maybe when you weren't there in the office, or they were your advocate, right? So can you talk a little bit about how you started with Anadarko, what position you were in, and then how you then succeeded into eventually becoming the COO?
Not COO.
It's not COO, sorry. The investor, you worked along with the COO, correct?
Yeah, I was very tight. Yeah. So, no, it was a great opportunity for me. And again, just the intersection with mentors along the way is what I credit most of my success to. Early on, the first role I took was in Midland, and it was a production engineering role, working the Permian Basin, and something I was very familiar with. I knew walking in, I could hit the ground running in a big way, and it worked out great. Worked with some really good friends. We had a great time. One of my really good friends there had he was a valedictorian of our class at A&M, and he went on to get a master's degree at Stanford. And he's just an academically minded individual. And so he and I were roommates for a time, and he was like, "Hey, we should take some classes." I'm like, okay. And so, when you're young and single and living in remote places, I guess you do.
You could be doing worse things.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people say, let's take classes instead of let's go to the
know,
bar.
but that's kind of what floated our boat at the time. And anyway, so we went to Midland Community College. It's a hilarious story. And they're looking at our resumes and trying to decide if we qualified for public speaking or whatever it was we wanted to take, some kind of arbitrary history class. And the the lady that was signing this in, she looked at my resume and she said, "Wow, this guy's got an engineering degree from A&M." That's nothing. This guy's an engineering degree from A&M and an engineering degree from Stanford. I think you guys qualify. We'll let you in. So anyway, we had fun with
These
that.
guys must be really bored, both of these guys. You
Yeah.
know, let's let them in.
So we, and by the way, we were having a lot of other fun as well. That
Yeah.
just studying the whole time. But it kind of warmed things up. And it was, you know, at A&M, I felt like I was so focused on getting grades that learning was very secondary. As I started thinking about what do I really want to learn, I was thinking, boy, I wish I would have had the opportunity to take this class and just learn, right? I don't care about the grades. And so when we started in, Ricky already had a master's degree. That was with Ricky Williams. But Brad Johnson, another classmate of mine, he was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a master's degree." We were really hunting for an MBA. And of course, 2 years out of school, the really top end MBA schools weren't very interested in us. And so we started looking, and University of Texas had a fully remote program. And at the time, you guys are going to just die because this is like before you're born. But they would FedEx you a VHS tape, VHS, like the big cassette things.
Oh my gosh.
To you put it in your TV, and you would, you know, watch the video and mail in and fax in homeworks and all this kind of stuff. I know he had email, but it doesn't seem like we were emailing stuff in for whatever reason.
Wow.
So
that is hilarious.
Yeah, ages me in a huge way. So then what was crazy about that is when my wife and I would take trips, I bought this little portable TV player that had a VHS deal, and I would sit in the back and I would listen to my classes and all this stuff. Even when I was working offshore, my next assignment was working in the Gulf of Mexico. I would go offshore and I would take over the movie room with like pressure transient analysis from some foreign professor that nobody could understand. And I was not very welcome, but
you were very dedicated though. That's so cool. I didn't know that they did virtual, you know, classes back then.
It was virtual. Yeah, that was state of the art virtual.
That's awesome.
Or something. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So I know throughout your long career at Anadarko, there was a point where kind of like your career shifted a little bit, and it was you got kind of like what you would call an upward facing role, where you got to work directly with the COO of Anadarko and being part of the investor relations kind of team, and very different from what you were doing from production and just regular engineering roles. What do you think landed you that job, or for to even be considered to, you know, go work directly with the CEO of Anadarko?
I think first thing, and this is a piece of advice that I would offer up, is my willingness to do whatever the company needed. There was very much I'm here to serve, tell me what to do, and I'll do my very best at whatever that is. And so I moved from various technical roles. When I was finishing my master's degree, I was able to do some really technical assignments and work with some really high-end technical players, which was great and fun. That was not the path that I saw for myself. Then I had some leadership roles. My wife and I actually moved back to Midland at one point for my first leadership assignment. And then when I came back, kind of got to just bounce around and do different type of leadership roles and explore that. After Anadarko merged with Kerr-McGee, there's a real shakeup and a real kind of resetting of the organization. And I had built enough credibility with the organization where I really had an opportunity to kind of choose my own path. And it was one of the few times that I was really just, kind of given a blank sheet of paper and saying, okay, what do you want to do? And so that role led to another. And basically I found myself leading a multidisciplinary team, geographic, we would call it like an asset manager or general manager today, of a, again, a multidisciplinary team, East Texas focused. And so one day, Chuck Malloy is the gentleman I was talking about. He ran worldwide operations for Anadarko, actually came from the Kerr-McGee side. And so he and I really didn't have a historic relationship, but he came to me and he said, hey, what would you think about working directly for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, sign me up. He was like, well, here's what it would look like. He said, right now you have a big capital budget, you have production, you have, dozens and dozens of employees, and you have field organization to manage and all that stuff. He said, you don't have any of that. You don't have anybody that will work for you. You're not going to get any production assigned to you. You're not going to have any capital budget, but what you'll get is kind of a seat next to me to see the world through my eyes and really see the organization kind of wall to wall, floor to ceiling, rather than just kind of downward facing at your particular asset. And again, I was kind of like, yeah, you had me at hello kind of thing.
Yeah.
You think it's a great role, sign me up. I did not appreciate nearly enough how eye-opening that role would be. And Chuck Malloy is that gentleman's name. Chuck was so gracious and kind and generous with his time towards me. And that was the difference maker for that role. Not the assignment, but because Chuck was willing to come in my office after a big meeting and say, what'd you think? What did you see?
Yeah.
What did you hear? You know, did you notice this? Do you know why I asked this question? What did you think about the answer to this question? Do you know why I asked this follow-up? And it was just,
wow.
I mean, all I can think about is this guy's calendar is booked and he's sitting in my office.
Yeah. Asking me.
That's amazing.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Absolutely amazing. And so
that's
generosity,
priceless.
Absolutely. The generosity of that was definitely, you know, he told me, because I was thinking about getting an MBA at the time, kind of an academic freak, I guess. And he told me, he said, look, this experience would be better than any MBA, you know, and it really was. He's a great human being, and more importantly than the lessons he gave me kind of in that environment about the business was, for the first time I got to work really exceptionally close with an executive, and I got to see that he had an incredible home life. He's a wonderful wife, super tight with his kids. He had a ranch that he enjoyed on the weekends. He had amazing real balance to his life. And I thought, for the first time, maybe I could do that, because my perception before that, and unfounded, because I just didn't have the proximity.
Yeah.
But my perception was, man, you have to give up your relationship with your kids and your wife and your life and your, you know, you kind of sell your soul. And I was like, that's great for somebody, it's just not for me. And that was the first time that I thought, okay, would I consider it? And for the first time, I'd say, yeah, this may be very appealing to me. Now, there's a million gates you have to cross to get actually that opportunity, but it was really inspiring to me and impacted my career in a huge way.
You're right. I think that's really inspiring because, like you said, a lot of times those higher roles, or, you know, usually if you're in a C-level, you usually see that the sacrifice. Oh, you know, they have this great role, but their life sucks in XXX because they never take vacation. They work so hard that they're not enjoying their lives. So like you said, it's kind of interesting that he was happy at home. He had a relationship with his kids, and that he had a ranch that he actually enjoyed, because a lot of times successful people aren't enjoying their lives. You're like, you're all successful, but what are you doing with your life? Like, the core of enjoyment is not there. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because it's rare. It's very rare to see, I'd say.
And please, I just want to make sure no one misinterprets that. He busted his butt. I mean, this guy worked hard and was exceptionally good. And Anadarko ringed out every value that they invested into that guy. I was amazed at how well he could do that and still carry on.
He did it right. Yeah, he had the right formula for him.
Clearly.
So working with him, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask was, did you ever think about being a president or a CEO? But you just kind of stated there that, hey, during this time with him, I kind of thought for the first time, like, that's something I think I could do. And it sounds like you were a little apprehensive before because you didn't think maybe you'd have that work-life balance. So what did he instill in you during that time that gave you the thought that, like, okay, I think I can have the same balance? Like, is there anything in particular that, made you believe, or that he showed you, or maybe a different way to manage your time? Did he provide any kind of expertise in that realm?
I don't know if there were real specific tactics. I think he just lived it. And so, I was also surrounded by, just sheer luck on my side that I had a good relationship with the CEO, Jim Hackett. And he is, like, one of the greatest ever in the history of our industry. And I would, be in meetings with him once or twice a week. We traveled together. I got to know him, and he's a fantastic human being. Just like, wow. And so again, seeing that and going, not so much the title, not so much the paycheck or those, but man, I aspire to be more like that person. Carl Kurz is another one. He came from the Anadarko side, was a COO of Anadarko. I was so incredibly lucky to have people to emulate so much more than how I conduct a meeting, how I conduct my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I still aspire today to emulate those things. And I hope I present a good model for others, because I think about that.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about Newfield and what happened at your 40th birthday that changed your career path. I know when we first kind of were getting to know you, you mentioned that there were 7 attributes that you had in your mind that you had ready for a headhunter. And if you hit all these points, then that's the only way you would maybe necessarily leave, Anadarko, which you had been there for 16 plus years.
Yeah. So it's an interesting kind of just confluence of events. After being at Anadarko for quite a while and built a great experience and rapport and reputation, there was no shortage of opportunities coming my way, typically through a headhunter, a phone call, or an email. And it was very easy for me to just hit the delete button and move on, because I was happy. Everything was working quite well. The doors were wide open, and I felt like I had plenty of upside potential to round out my career. The part I struggled with was, and this is probably just a little bit of my own overthinking things, have I built so much good rapport and reputation? Is that what is propagating my career as I go forward? Or if I really had a clean break and a fresh start, could I really do this again? Can I test myself to really go and succeed? I kind of got a taste of that when I worked for Chuck, because again, he didn't know the prior 14 years of my career. We were relatively new to get to know each other, and clearly he saw something in me he wanted to invest in. With the story you were talking about, pretty fascinating. So I was coming up on my 40th birthday, and I told my wife, I said, I haven't had a birthday party since I was 12. I've got all these amazing friends. I want to have a party. I want to get, people together. We have friends from this circle and this circle, and I'd love to have everybody together. So we had a party at our house, and we hired a caterer and a couple of ladies to help with the catering and the bar and all that. And it was great. I mean, just all of these circles of friends, and, just one of those events that was just spectacular. So the interesting part is people were bringing in, a bottle of wine or a card or some kind of gift. And sometime during the night, the ladies that were there that were helping us moved all of this stuff from one room to another. And so the next day, I'm kind of looking through this pile of stuff. I'm reading cards and having a great time, kind of reflecting on the night. And I get to this book, and it's actually at my house, but it's called Halftime by Bob Buford. And I open the book up, and there's no writing in it. And I'm looking for a card that somehow ties back to the book.
Yeah.
and I can't find it. And so I'm like, well, that's odd. I'll figure it out. Somebody will mention something or whatever. So I put it on my nightstand and in my stack. And as I work through the stack, I get to the book, I read the book, and basically the subtitle of the book is Moving from Success to Significance. And it's a story of a gentleman that had wild success and really didn't know the value of family and significance until he had great loss. And so he talks about kind of recentering his life and all this. And here I am, and it's really kind of mid-career kind of person. What are you going to do? Sure, you can, acquire good titles and, maybe even a larger stack of mutual funds or something. But what's the significance of your life? And so that's what caused me. One of the calls to action was, really write things down, spend a little soul searching time and figure out what is that next opportunity, or what would you be drawn to? And I'm thinking back on these headhunter calls. And so it caused me to pause and say, okay, if I were ever to leave Anadarko, which I dearly love today, it would have to be all of these things. And I think there was 7 items, and they're pretty aspirational. It'd have to be this kind of role. It'd have to be this kind of company. It'd have to be this kind of upside, and, this da, 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 da. And within a couple of months, sure enough, I had a call that was describing a role that checked a whole lot of those boxes. And for the first time, I couldn't just hit the delete button.
Yeah.
So I ended up having a lunch meeting with the CEO of Newfield, Lee Boothby. And next thing I know, I'm in Tulsa leading their mid-continent business, and part of an organization that, although it was 25 years old, was very self-aware that it was an inflection point. It was an opportunity to kind of rebrand and inflect for the company. And as it turned out, we ended up recentering the business around the mid-continent business. Just dumb luck. I happened to be standing in the spot right at the right time. And so we put together the scoop and the stack position. My team, I'm very proud of, that actually named the stack during that process. I was at a bar in Tulsa at the Daily Grill, in case anybody wants to go recreate the moment. But anyway, it was an opportunity that, I found myself in. And for the first time, moving outside of Anadarko, I could much better appreciate all the great things and the challenges about different companies. Because another piece of advice I would offer is, if you've been with a company for 16 years, as an example, you're swimming in a pond and it's hard to articulate what's unique about that pond because you've lived in it for so long. 1 week, 1 month, 1 year on the job at Newfield, now I could reflect back on my experience at Anadarko and much better have a view of, here's what's really great, and here's some of the weaknesses, and here's what's better here, and kind of give that much better rounded approach. A couple of years later, I had the opportunity to come over to WPX as that company was going through a massive restart. The board had decided we need a whole new direction, and Rick Moncrief had just come over. I didn't know Rick, but through about I would say, 10 breakfast meetings, kind of back to back to back, we got to know each other a whole lot, and he's persuasive, and so ended up coming to WPX, and that's been an amazing ride to hit a full reset for that organization, rebuild, and building something we were all exceptionally proud of.
So throughout your career, it sounds like you've been pretty much niche and being able to come over to a company, rebuild. You even named, like you said, the scoop, the stack when you were with Newfield, and then going over to WPX, being a part of all these mergers. You think that your education has a big role to do with it, or do you think it has to do with kind of a little bit of education, experience, and then who you as a person, and what attributes as a person do you think kind of helped you in those situations? Because not everybody can do that, especially be successful at it.
Yeah. One point of clarification: Continental name Scoop. That was Harold.
Oh,
Hamstead.
Sorry.
Stackside, but I don't want Harold coming after me. He's just down the road. No, I would say it was less about any particular class I took and the application of some knowledge. I think it was looking for those mentors. I had college mentors. BP Huddleston was one of my professors at Texas A&M, and maybe the person that I most want to emulate in my life. Incredibly generous, very, very successful, wonderful family. And every Friday afternoon for, I think it was 15 or 16 years, he would fly back from wherever he was in the world, and he would teach students from 2 to 5. Once a week, he took this class. And that's, as a college student, that's the worst schedule in the world. No one
Friday
missed
afternoon.
a session.
Yeah.
I guarantee it was the best attended. Everyone's on the edge of their seat because this guy, he just tell you about what he did this past week, and it was like jaw dropping,
Mind blowing.
I cannot believe. And he would tell you, I don't care what you learned in this class, here's what you really need to know. And so his dedication and reinvestment back into students is something I definitely want to emulate and so appreciate. That class was probably more influential on handling situations, learning from people, always being a learner, never being dismissive or presumptive about, hey, this person has a degree from such and such, they must be really, really good. Or this person doesn't have a degree at all, they must really be really, really bad. None of those things are truisms. And so really knowing, here's a key takeaway, knowing every person out there you can learn from. Your job is to figure out, what can I learn from this person, this situation, this opportunity, and being, I hate to use the word selfish, but maybe that's the best word, selfish in that environment, and to like I want to know all about you. I want to know all about your history. I want to know all about how did you make that decision, knowing that that ultimately will benefit you in the end. And in reality, this is a Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of the classic takeaways is people love to talk about themselves. And so when you engage in somebody and you're like, tell me more, that is fascinating. They think, wow, you're a great communicator. You really, really, really know how to engage. In reality, they're just talking about themselves. So I've always enjoyed learning about people. I like people. And one last plug, I had the opportunity to take a year-long leadership course through Stegan. It's an organization in Dallas, the Stegan Academy, and kind of the capstone project, because it takes a year to kind of get to this point, but you have to figure out what your higher purpose is. And so reflecting back on all of these interactions with just amazing people along the way, Rand Stegan became a good friend, somebody I could confide into. I'm like, this is what I'm trying to get towards. And so, as explaining to him, I came up with the word wisdom. And then I said, but it's more than just wisdom. I'm blown away at their generosity of being able to spend time with me. Any of these guys are incredibly smart and successful and all that. What are they doing wasting their time with little old me? That blew me away. And then what I told him is it wasn't about just like filling my cup and hoarding all of this knowledge. I so enjoy sharing that and interfacing with young people. I'm so flattered. Just wrote a letter of recommendation to an incredible young lady as she's trying to go to Texas A&M. And I'm like, she's awesome. She is absolutely incredible. And I'm honored. Sent her a text that I'm absolutely honored that she asked me to represent her. And so I said a part of it's kind of that giving back. So after a year, here's what I got up. It's my mission in life is to be a conduit of wisdom and generosity. That's it.
Yeah.
Took me a year. So here I am.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all this. This is such a good podcast for anyone, wanting to learn a little bit more about looking outside of just the career aspect and more of giving back, So last question is, you've been through the WX and Devon merger recently. We know that's very challenging. It's usually bringing two different cultures together, two different kinds of employees. People are worried about their jobs, about what's happening with this new company. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that's been? And I know when we last spoke, you mentioned that both companies had a very strong positive culture. So how do you handle putting them together and recreating a new company with a new culture?
Yeah, you are correct in all of those assumptions. It's difficult. It's hard. It took very much in a merger of equals approach. Trying to blend the best of from both sides is so much more difficult than just saying, look, we're going to take the blue team's approach on all this and the red team's approach on all this, and just we'll figure it out later. What we've attempted to do is dissect so many processes and the way we do things, and even organization. But you're right, culture is the big one. And I'll be completely honest, we're still working on that, but there's wins along the way. I had a tremendous meeting last week with the field superintendents. As with most companies, we're still struggling quite a bit with COVID and trying to understand how do we help the situation. And we can only do so much as an employer, but it's affecting friends and coworkers and business very deeply. And so because I had pre-invested in those relationships, I've been out to every one of our field offices twice, spent quality kind of windshield time with all of these field leaders. I could get them on a video call and ask for some real candid feedback. And I was culturally very, very excited about how candid the conversation was, which tells me that we have moved pretty far down the road. As you can imagine, you're just trying to get to know somebody. You're concerned about all those things you mentioned, which is exactly right. I think I'm just going to sit back and see how this plays out. I'm not going to offer up any kind of candid feedback. That's not the case. We were really getting, and I so appreciate some very honest perspective that sitting in Oklahoma City, I just don't have. And so calling for the greater advisory council, as I think about people, let me see it through your eyes. How is this going? What can we do to improve things? And that's much broader than COVID or merger. When I think about diversity and inclusion, which I was very happy to speak to our diversity and inclusion team a few weeks back, I talked about the the value of the CEO, my boss, going out to the field and spending time with a lease operator and really listening and really understanding, how's this thing working for you? That, man, that is inclusive in a massive, massive way. And so really kind of opening that conversation up and knowing that it's not just yes men or women that we're looking for. It's not polish it to the point where, yeah, it's not that bad, boss. There's a little frustration, but we'll be okay. No, we need to hear it. Where's the pinch points? Where can we impact things? And I get, look, I'm a realist, that 6 months, 7 months into this merger, that everything's not worked out just yet. What I can tell you is the results. So we have 4 values. That's for another podcast that we've combined the organizations about. And one of those is results, and delivering on results is incredibly important. And it's what we're here for. It's what we're paid for. And so we can never shy away from that. Relationships, courage, and integrity are the other 3, just to kind of tease out the next conversation sometime. But anyway, it's going really well. When I allow myself to kind of pan out to 100,000 feet and having lived through some really significant changes in organizations, we are doing great. Is it without pain? No, there's still a lot of, just even the individuals that have relocate their family and, pull kids out of school and transition, and I'm living it myself, and that adds to complexity and transitional challenges. So overall, really good, really pleased, happy with where we're at. And I'm incredibly, incredibly excited about the path ahead, because we have built heck of a powerhouse.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for just being so open about sharing a little bit about your life, your your challenges, your mentors, and it's amazing. Thank you so much. It's such a good podcast. What really spoke to me is the success to significance. It's like engraved in my head all of a sudden, where sometimes we do just need to focus a little bit on what are we doing with what we're after. All I think about sometimes is like, oh, I want this role and this title and this paycheck that's going to be attached to it, and all this stuff that I'm sure a lot of us listening, we focus on, mid-career or early on in our careers. But I love what you said about what are we doing with that significance part is just like, it's awesome. That's kind of what I got out of this podcast. So thank you so much. And we wish you the best at what you guys are doing at Devon. And thank you for just coming on and sharing your story. You're doing so much already for giving back, like you like to do, to students who are listening, or even, the younger generation. So.
And appreciate the books too that you mentioned as well. Our listeners love to hear kind of what y'all recommend reading, and I think that's really important. And it actually, really changed your life. And I think that's great that you shared that with us. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to do it. And again, thank you guys for what you do. This is a whole audience that many of me and my peers don't get to interface with. So so glad you guys have this venue, and thank you for the invite. I'm flattered to be part of it.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you.